Here are some of the best inventions from ancient Egypt. Number 11. Breath mints and toothpaste. Many ancient Egyptians had to deal with deteriorating teeth, partly because of their diet, which included plenty of honey and sugar. As you can imagine, bad breath was a problem, especially for the nobles and royals who considered themselves pristine. The solution came in the form of the first breath mint, made from a combination of myrrh, cinnamon, and frankincense. These ingredients were often boiled together in a honey base and then shaped into pellets for easy consumption. While the breath mint pretty much just covered up some bad breath, the ancient Egyptians knew that they actually had to clean their mouths too. The world's oldest known recipe for toothpaste comes from Egypt. According to the recipe that dates from around 5000 BC, the earliest known toothpaste was made of powdered ashes of ox hooves, myrrh, powdered and burnt eggshells, and pumice. I'm happy that recipe was updated throughout the years. Along with the Babylonians, ancient Egyptians are also credited with inventing the first toothbrushes, which were frayed ends of wooden twigs. Yeah, glad this was updated as well. Number 10. Door locks. The oldest known evidence of a door lock comes from the ruins of an ancient Egyptian palatial complex, dating from around 2000 BC. The design entailed a simple but effective pin tumbler lock. The bolt that secured the door is made out of wood. It has a slot with several holes on its upper surface. A device attached to the door contains wooden pins, which would drop into the holes and secure the bolt. The key, also wooden, is a large toothbrush-shaped object, with bristles that are actually pegs that match the holes and pins in the lock. To open the door, the key would be inserted into the hole located below the pins and lifted, raising the pins and allowing the bolt to be slid out. Does that seem like it sounds familiar? That's because, incredibly enough, the core design element of the pin tumbler lock is still in use today. Number 9. Papyrus. Along with the Mesopotamians, the ancient Egyptians were one of the first people to develop their language into a codified form of writing. All early forms of writing were pictograms, pictures. But since you need something to write on, instead of taking all day to etch on a piece of stone, there came papyrus. The word paper comes from the Greek word papyrus, or as we write it today, papyrus, the writing material created by the ancient Egyptians. Papyrus was made from the tough and fibrous interior of a stiff, red-like plant that grew, and still grows, in the marshy areas along the banks of the Nile. But you also need ink to write, right? Yeah, the Egyptians knew how to make their ink strong. Evidence of ancient Egyptian ink can still be seen today, as thousands of years later, the ink is either entirely or partially visible on manuscripts. They mixed soot, vegetable gum, and beeswax to make black ink. To get other colors, they replaced the soot with other organic materials, such as ochre, which made red-colored ink. Number 8. Irrigation systems. To make the best use of the waters of the Nile River, the Egyptians developed systems of irrigation that allowed the Egyptians to use the Nile's water for a variety of purposes. Of course, irrigation granted them greater control over the land. Really, how else would they be able to plant things if the Nile is either flooding constantly or there's zero water for crops to grow? But by doing the irrigation systems, they were able to divert flood water away from certain areas, such as cities and gardens, to keep them from flooding. The Egyptians also developed and utilized a form of water management known as basin irrigation. This practice allowed them to control the rise and fall of the river to best suit their agricultural needs. A crisscross network of earthen walls was formed in a field of crops that would be flooded by the river. When floods that would inevitably come, the water would be trapped in the basins formed by the walls. This grid would hold water longer than it would have naturally, allowing the earth to become fully saturated for later planting. Once the soil was fully watered, the flood water that remained in the basin would simply be drained to another basin that was in need of more water. Number 7. Clocks. In order to tell the time, Egyptians invented two types of clock, sundials and water clocks. Hold up, what's a water clock? We'll get to that one in a minute. The oldest known sundial is from Egypt. Obviously, it's a device that uses the sun to measure time. There were many kinds of sundials used in the ancient world, but one of the best preserved sundials found from ancient Egypt consisted of a flat base with 12 lines projecting from a hole that held an upright wooden or metal bowl. As the bolt's shadow moved across the lines, the time could be told. As sundial technology continued to be improved, the ancient Egyptians were even able to tell which were the longest and shortest days of the year. But what happens at night when the sun goes down? The Egyptians read the time using water clocks at night. It was made from a stone vessel shaped like an inverted cone that had a tiny hole at the bottom to allow water to drip. The water dripped from the hole at an almost constant rate. Along the inside of the vessel, columns of equally spaced markings allowed a person to tell what the hour was by the level of the water. I'm gonna have to say, that's definitely ingenious right there. Number 6. Calendars. In ancient Egypt, a calendar could mean the difference between feast and famine. Without a calendar, ancient Egyptians had no way of knowing when the annual flooding of the Nile would begin. Without that knowledge, their entire agricultural system would be put at risk. So, a few thousand years before the Common Era, they developed their own calendar. The ancient Egyptian calendar was a solar calendar with a 365-day year. Their calendar was so closely tied into farming that the Egyptians divided it up into 3 main seasons: inundation, growing, and harvest. Each season had 4 months, with each month divided into 30 days. However, if you add it all up, you only get 360 days a year, a bit short of an actual year. To make up the difference, the Egyptians added 5 days between the harvest and inundation seasons. These 5 extra days were designated as religious holidays, set aside to honor the children of the gods. Number 5. Farming tools. The ancient Egyptians famously farmed the black soils of the Nile Delta, an area with little rainfall that was irrigated by seasonal floodwaters. Ancient farmers living in Egypt used a number of tools to farm this land, many of which are still a part of agriculture and gardening. Ancient Egyptian farmers used a number of tools to work the soil of the Nile Delta. Some of these are in use today, such as sickles, hand plows, and pitchforks. A lesser-known tool called the shadaf, still used in some parts of the world, was important for irrigation. The Egyptians and Sumerians were among the first societies to employ the use of the plow around 4000 BC. Built from modified hand tools, the plows were so light and ineffective that they are now referred to as scratch plows for their inability to dig deep into the ground. The whole concept of the plow changed around 2000 BC, when the Egyptians first hooked their plows to oxen. The plow, combined with the steady rhythm of the Nile River, essentially revolutionized the process and made farming much easier for the Egyptians. Number 4. Scissors. Many people mistakenly give credit to Leonardo da Vinci for inventing scissors. Although da Vinci was brilliant, scissors were around for a long time before he came around. Ancient Egyptians created a scissor-like device around 1500 BC. They were a single piece of metal, typically bronze, and made into 2 blades that were controlled by a metal strip. The strip kept the blades apart until they were squeezed together, and each blade was sharp enough to do the cuts. However, pivoted scissors of bronze or iron, in which the blades were pivoted at a point between the tips and the handles, essentially the direct ancestor of modern scissors, were invented by the Romans around 100 AD. These scissors entered common use not only in ancient Rome, but also China, Japan, and Korea. Number 3. Makeup and wigs. Egyptians appeared to care a great deal about the way they looked. Pharaohs had their own hairdressers and manicurists, and cosmetics was apparently big business back then. In ancient Egypt, cosmetics were widely used by both men and women. Black eyeliner was applied daily, and ochre was applied for rouge. Oils and creams, often scented, kept skin moist in the dry climate. Sometimes cosmetics were even given as part of their wages. But makeup alone wasn't enough, and wearing a wig signaled a person's rank in Egyptian society. Although a shaved head was a sign of nobility during most of the Egyptian kingdoms, the majority of Egyptians kept their heads covered. Wigs were worn in place of headdresses, or for special occasions, with elaborate headdresses. The base of an Egyptian wig was a fiber netting skull cap, with strands of human hair, wool, flax, palm fibers, felt, or other materials attached. The wig hair often stuck straight out from the skull cap, creating large, full wigs that offered wearers protection from the heat of the sun. I wonder how comfortable these wigs were. Number 2. Prosthetics. Surprising as it may be, we may have to thank ancient Egyptians for the prosthetics that are around today. 2 artificial Egyptian toes were found, and researchers have suspected that those are the world's oldest known prosthetic body parts. One of the toes is a 3,000-year-old wooden prosthesis, which was found attached to a female mummy in an ancient Egyptian gravesite near Luxor, and was determined to be from between 950 to 710 BC. The toe has been made of cartonnage, a sort of papier-mâché mixture made using linen, glue, and plaster. Because of the precise construction of the ancient prosthesis, researchers guessed that the owner, a priest's daughter, wanted the toe to look as natural as possible and be comfortable to wear. A study suggests that that was really the case. 2 volunteers who were both missing their right big toe tested the replicas of the ancient toes. The toe replicas, along with the replicas of the leather Egyptian-style sandals, were made to fit each volunteer. The results showed that the prosthetics would have made walking around in Egyptian sandals much easier, suggesting that they weren't just used in burial or in some other non-practical way, but in fact, worn as actual prosthetics. Number 1. Surgery. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is a comprehensive medical text on surgery from ancient Egypt that was written around 1600 BC. This document was named after the dealer who bought the manuscript in 1862. The document may have been a manual of military surgery, as it describes how to treat injuries such as fractures, wounds, and dislocations. It's the world's oldest known surgical treatise, and is 15.3 feet in length. The front side has 377 lines in 17 columns, while the back side has 92 lines in 5 columns. The vast majority of the papyrus is concerned with trauma and surgery, with short sections on gynecology and cosmetics on the back. On the front side, there are 48 cases of injury. Each case details the type of injury, examination of the patient, diagnosis and prognosis, and treatment. The papyrus begins by addressing injuries to the head, and continues with treatments for injuries to the neck, arms, and torso, detailing injuries in descending anatomical order, much like a modern anatomical exposition. Definitely probably pretty handy to have in order to treat soldiers with serious injuries. Here's what's next.
Fine. And the more silent you managed to stay, the braver you were. It was performed by priests who used stone blades. Are you kidding me? It goes without saying that there were 0 painkillers involved. However, circumcision was far from mandatory in Egypt. Not everyone